Now, let's go back to our friend Laurent, who is the Deputy Director of the ESPON program. And Laurent is going to talk to us in particular about the territorial and urban dimensions in digitalization of public services. So, Head of Unit for Evidence and Outreach at ESPON EGTC, please welcome back Laurent Frideres. Seems like you're getting lucky.
I'm getting lucky?
Yes, that was the song that introduced you then.
So, very good. But
Yeah.
the clock has started. Okay, so there we go. So good morning again. Digital tools and solutions are transforming public services and the way governments serve the needs of their citizens. And some cities have already started adopting new solutions and transforming their processes, but there are still many challenges ahead. There's a large hole outside, on the pavement outside my house. I've been walking past this for quite a while, and a few weeks ago I decided to take action. So my city, like so many cities, is going digital, so they now have an app. This app allows you to track buses, to track parking spaces, to see what events are on. And it also has a particular feature that allows you to report particular incidents or issues in the infrastructure. It was 2 weeks before the local elections, so I thought, why not? Let's try my luck. So I took a picture of my pavement. There it is. And I submitted it via the app. So what the app does, it essentially logs all these incidents that are reported by citizens. So my little picture with a short note just to say, I think the photo was quite self-explanatory, but to say, the pavement is broken. So up it went into the app, and it was mapped along with a series of other incidents here on the map, on the map that you can see. So a couple of days later, very exciting. So the status changed, and my little photo was assigned an incident number. I think if something is assigned an incident number, it makes it quite serious. So the status of this issue was confirmed, so you see a little orange thing there. And then not much happened. The elections came and went, my pavement was still broken. But then last week, what happened? Something changed. We had a little green box that appeared. It wasn't actually terminated. In French, it means completed. So my little incident was completed. I was a bit confused because my pavement was still broken. So what had happened? There was a little note attached that said, well, so your little incident was passed on to the Service for Infrastructure and has been assigned to the program for being fixed. So hopefully my pavement, when I get home at the end of the week, will be fixed. So what does this little example tell us? The way cities engage with their citizens is really changing. So the engagement, this particular example allowed me to engage very directly with my local administration. It creates transparency, so I created this incident report, and I was able to track the progress. It also has a fundamental impact for the administrations themselves, because they have to change their processes, they have to change the way in which services work with one another. So in this case, the service that runs the website, of course, has to communicate with the services that runs the road infrastructure. It also raises issues of trust. In this particular instance, I submitted this report anonymously because all this data is available, and I wasn't quite sure what they were going to do with it, so they might send me the invoice at the end. So I figured, let's do it anonymously. So there's certainly issues of trust and data security that need to be addressed. The digital transition is really reshaping public services. We've heard some of the key messages already from our policy brief by Predo in the introduction. The vast majority of city services have improved as a result of digitalization. The policy brief that ESPON has prepared, and you can find a copy outside, we surveyed over 130 cities in Europe and asked the chief digital officers what is the status of the digital transformation of their city services. And the results is essentially what you see inside the policy brief. So more than 1 in 3 cities has seen a substantial increase in the uptake of specific services as a result of digitalization. Over 2/3 of cities also use the data that they gathered from these new digital services to improve decision-making processes. Costs have been reducing, But then, of course, also there is the challenge of jobs. So also 3 in 5 cities has seen a reduction in staffing, although for most this was a marginal reduction. So ESPON being ESPON, of course, we try to map this particular transition. So we looked at different types of services. So for 9 different service themes, from spatial planning to education and healthcare, we looked at the level at which the digital solutions are being implemented. So is it at local level, at regional level, or at national level? And there are some differences. So you can see here that for spatial planning and construction, it's primarily at the local level that services have been digitalized, whereas for healthcare and road infrastructure, it's really at the national level where the transition is taking shape. So we try to map all this. You're very familiar, most of you, I assume, with ESPON maps, but we try to come up with a little bit of an innovative format. So inside the policy brief, you find a map that looks a little bit like this. And what it shows you is the share of service digitalization. So little boxes that are in red have a low level of digitalization, and in blue, a high share of digitalization. And we mapped this so for different regions in Europe, so you can compare Northern Europe to Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and Southern Europe. And for the specific, so 9 different service themes and 57 specific services, we mapped essentially what the share of digitalization is for specific services. So you can compare the level of digitalization for towns for particular services to the national level. If I take a particular example here, so for Northern Europe, obtaining land use and cadastral data online, so if you go from the left to right, you see that towns have a very low level of digitalization. That's the first box. The third box is larger cities, so there the level of digitalization is very high. At the regional level, it's quite low, and at the national level, it's also quite high. So what are the drivers of this digital transition of public services? Clearly, it is about modernizing the city services. It's about increasing efficiency. It's also about improving the citizen experience, as we've seen in the first example. There are some differences between towns, smaller cities, and larger cities. For example, the towns and medium and small-sized cities have a higher share where the drivers are the modernization of the city services. Perhaps surprisingly, extending the range of services or the coverage are not amongst the top 3 drivers in this instance. So how do we go about bringing about this digital transition? Strategy is really key. So we asked the cities whether they have a digital strategy in place. And here we can see that there's still quite a lot to be done. So in gray are the cities that have not yet adopted a digital strategy, and in dark purple you see the ones that have implemented. So the level of implementation of digital strategies is still quite low. And generally, smaller towns and cities are lagging behind in terms of the adoption of the digital strategy, but also, of course, in the implementation. So what about the challenges for implementing the digital transition? Perhaps not surprisingly, funding is the #1 challenge, and this applies to any city independent of size. But there are also other challenges where there are some differences between cities of different sizes. So for example, the smaller cities and towns, they face a bigger challenge in terms of lacking an overall strategy, in terms of still having a resistance to adopt digital solutions. Skills are quite a significant challenge for cities of all sizes. Then larger cities have a higher share of them consider security concerns and also the particular legal framework to be barriers. That may also be a fact. The reason for that may also be that they have perhaps progressed further in the adoption of digital solutions, so they have already adopted their strategy, so they've now moved on to other barriers. But clearly security and having the right legal frameworks are key. The way to deliver this new digital solutions clearly involves collaboration. So these are engaging with other peers, with other cities in Europe, in understanding which services they have digitalized, what are some of the best practices, but then also developing partnerships, collaborations with the private sector. So also the solution providers who end up delivering some of these solutions. And what's come out from the study is that the level of engagement in these collaboration networks, in partnerships, has a direct impact on the improvement to city digital services. And towns and smaller cities are really lagging behind in terms of developing their collaborations and in terms of engaging in these public-private partnerships. So there's really more to be done in that area. So what is the impact? It's been mentioned already before, but in terms of improvement to city services, I think the evidence here is overwhelming that city services have improved as a result of digitalization. It's a slightly smaller share for towns, but it's still very significant. And in terms of the uptake of services, so this is essentially cities delivering a new service in a digital way, seeing an increase in the uptake of that particular service. Here, essentially universally for larger cities, that they have seen an increase in the uptake of services. Towns and smaller and medium-sized cities are lagging a little bit behind also in this particular area. So what are some of the key policy messages that have come out of this research? I think what we try to do is to really tailor these messages to the different levels, because the message is not that every city of each, independent of their size, should digitalize all its services. That is really not the point. That's also not the point of the mapping. But I think the mapping will really gives us a detailed picture of what the status is, and I think it will kind of feed the debate also on where do we go from here. So at EU level, I think a key is really to remove barriers to interoperability. I think this is really to drive the adoption of new digital services. I think creating a European platform for cities to share their data and services will also allow for a wider range of services to be delivered. And then we need supportive legal frameworks for digital solutions in many areas, but particularly in healthcare and social welfare services where privacy and security are major concerns. And there really more action is needed at EU level. There's a number of initiatives that are of course ongoing, but that is one of the key areas for action at EU level. So at national and regional level, I think it's key to build partnerships to develop digital solutions in different sectors, but particularly in education and transport, where we see that digital transformation is primarily driven by the national and regional levels. Also, we've seen towns and smaller cities are lagging behind, so I think it's essential to support the digital transition of towns and smaller cities. So not every small town is able to digitalize its services, so it's key to also provide the necessary support to ensure that no town or city is left behind. Medium-sized and larger cities should invest in ICT infrastructure for local digital services. So even if you talk about the cloud, I think there's still an infrastructure behind it, both in terms of data storage, but also in terms of the communication networks, in terms of the fast mobile internet. So the next generation IT infrastructure is absolutely essential to facilitate the digital transition of public services. Then also, new solutions have to be tested, have to be piloted. So I think there's really an opportunity for medium-sized and larger cities to open up for the development, testing, and rollout of these new types of solutions. So there could be new mobility solutions, there could be new solutions in planning as well. So there's really an opportunity to build these public-private partnerships that allow the demonstration, the large-scale demonstration, and the piloting of new digital solutions. Then finally, for towns and smaller cities, some are still lagging behind in adopting a digital strategy, so it's absolutely key that cities do put this on their agenda and adopt a digital strategy. The key to the success of the implementation of the strategy is the appointment of a digital leader. So typically, digital transformation is a horizontal exercise. It affects different services, and there's a need for leadership in order to drive that transformation through local government in particular. And then really map and prioritize the service to be digitalized at local level. So the message is really not that perhaps you have a low level of digitalization in a particular area that you should speed up there, but it's really identify those services where which should be served as a priority at the local level. For example, smaller towns may not need a sophisticated parking monitoring system or a mobility solution, but they may want to invest in solutions that drive citizen participation and engagement. And then really engage in collaborations and peer learning to find out more about best practices, and also to essentially develop the skills. I think the skills are really one of the key challenges that we face in Europe that allows public institutions to adopt those solutions. So those were the key messages. I would really invite you to take a look at the policy brief. There are copies outside, and of course, for the audience at home, it's also available online. I've given you a bit of an overview of some of the main messages, but of course, the interesting bits are sometimes in the details. So please take a look at the policy brief, and we look forward to discussing the various topics and the questions that were raised during this first panel, and then also in the policy labs later on this morning. Thank you.
Great. Laurent, thank you very much.